Hello everyone, welcome back to my channel. My name is Jenny and I'm here today to give you my rankings list for the BookTube Prize 2023 nonfiction category. So overall, I think that all of these 6 books are really wonderful examples of the breadth of nonfiction. They cover many different topics in many different ways, and all of them did a great job of that. So ranking these books was a challenge as usual. Actually, I won't say as usual. Usually there's at least one that is not a very good book, and it's easier to rank them when that's the case. But for these, I had to rank them again, as I did for both the times I was a judge this year. I had to rank them based on my personal enjoyment and how I felt that they would appeal to a large audience of people. Maybe in the end, the ranking was a bit more just about my own enjoyment than appealing to the masses. But I'll try to, I'll give you my rankings and then you can decide. And I'm going to say for the record that I have a feeling that my rankings will be outliers. I think there's 65 judges in this category, and I think I will definitely be outliers. So I'm filming this before I know the results, and I highly believe that my rankings will not be the norm. So I'm just putting that out there. I just think that the way I interpret these books is different from other people. So I'm going to start with number 6. Which I put as My Fourth Time We Drowned by Sally Hayden. This was, again, when you think a book is good, it's really hard to put it in the 6th place, but this is a ranking. So the reason I chose this one here is because of how difficult I found it to read. And this is not Sally Hayden's fault. This is not the book's fault in any way. It is just that this topic is very dire. It is very serious. It has, there's not much that you can put in here that is uplifting or that is positive about such a dire situation, which is the refugee crisis going on across the Mediterranean when African migrants are trying to leave and they get brought back to Libya, where they are put into detention centers where they are treated terribly. And it's a very horrible situation, a very complex situation, and I think this book showed that very well and explained it very well. But overall, it was very difficult to read and get through because I just didn't want to read it. I didn't want to be faced with the very dire circumstances that these people are in, and it made me feel very helpless. And so it got my number 6 spot. Number 5 is An Immense World by Yong on my rankings. Now, this book is most likely going to win. If I have to predict that a book is going to win the Nonfiction BookTube Prize, I'm going to put Immense World down as my guess. There again, it's a great book. It is all about the senses. So the author takes us through different senses and explains different animals that have these senses or enhanced versions of these senses or senses that are similar to these senses. For me, there was a little bit of a strange layout to how the information was distributed between footnotes and regular text, and I found that I got kind of bored by some of the examples he used. I didn't find all the examples to be equally compelling or interesting, and so this is a heavy science book as well, and I'm just not into heavy science books. So I know that this book is going to be very highly rated, but I, because of my own personal taste, had to put it low. And I know that that will probably have no real influence on it not being in the top 3 because I'm pretty sure it'll win or be in the top 3. It's just other people have adored this book. Number 4 was Paradise Falls by Keith O'Brien, and I really enjoyed this book. I thought he did such a great job of explaining the situation in Niagara Falls around Love Canal, which was something that happened in the 60s and 70s, where chemicals that had been buried in this part of New York State started leaching up through the ground and causing a lot of health problems to the communities that lived there. And so this is that story. And Keith O'Brien is a great writer. He writes nonfiction like it's fiction. He gets you really into the characters. You really feel like you know the people that you're reading about. And so he did a great job, and I think it's a great book. And I think that picking number 4 and number 3 was actually the hardest for me, and that's often the case for a lot of judges, I think. In number 3, I put My Name is George Floyd by Robert Samuels and Toluse Olorunnipa. And the reason it got number 3 and not Paradise Falls was because of, to me, the importance of voices being heard and of people understanding who George Floyd was as a person, and what his death, the impact his death had on the world, on his family, on the people around him, and on the pivotalness of that moment, which is really not that long ago in the grand scheme of things, only 3 years ago. So it was a really well put together book, I thought, and I thought that they did a great job of making George Floyd seem like a full person, not a perfect person, not a saint, not someone that deserved to be murdered in any case, but not a perfect person. And so I think that was a really powerful aspect of this book, really important. And I think that's why I wanted it to be in the top 3. My number 2 pick was Eating to Extinction by Dan Saladino. And I was actually very surprised by this. I didn't think that a book about food would be my number 2. But for me, this book was really interesting. The stories that Dan Saladino picked, the foods and the parts of the world that he explored to create this book, all fascinating. I found the way he shared the information to be very retainable. So I ended up learning things and kind of retaining those facts. Well, I don't know if I've retained them that far, but I was able to retain them long enough to tell them to other people, some of them. And I was really brought into kind of learned about a part of history that I don't usually pay that much attention to, which is the history of foods, the evolutions of domesticated animals, which I find really interesting. And I just thought it was the biggest surprise for me on this list. It was the book that I thought would be the lightest, the least heavy topic. Although I thought Saladino did a great job of relating these foods to climate change, and so telling you how climate change, war, and the capitalist tendencies to commodify everything have created a lot of the rarity and extinctions that have gone on in foods and in culture. I thought he did a good job of connecting culture and food. So I just think this is a great nonfiction. I think it really has the power to open your mind up to something that you probably don't think is as important as it is. So for me, that's a really powerful book when something can do that. And so that means that for number 1, I put The Escape Artist by Jonathan Freedland. This is the story of Rudolf Verba, originally named Walter Rosenberg, who escaped from Auschwitz, and his absolutely incredible story of his life, and the way he looked at the world as a young teenager, determined to escape Auschwitz and tell the world what was happening to Jewish people. And this book reads like fiction. It's just got a good movement to it. It shares, a lot of statistics and facts, but in a way that's very digestible. It's also very difficult to read. You're reading about concentration camps. I'm not going to beat around the bush. That is not a fun thing to read about. There are horrible, horrible things that happened to people there, and that is very difficult to read. I'm not going to tell you that those things were easy for me to read because they read like fiction. It was still very difficult to know that these things were that happened. But I think as an important piece of Second World War history, it is absolutely essential to telling a well-rounded story about this time period because of the tendency of people to glorify this time. I think it's really important that we look at all periods in history with a critical eye and see them more subjectively, understand the nuances that were going on, and this book is brilliant at uncovering so many nuances that I don't think enough people understand about what happens on the ground when something like a world war is happening. So those are my rankings for BookTube Prize, a 2023 final round for nonfiction. Like I said, I am sure I'm an outlier here in some way because I usually am in my rankings. Especially with nonfiction, I just seem to walk to a different drummer than other people. All of these books are worth your time. All of these topics are important. All of these writers did an excellent job at research and writing their books. So I don't think you could go wrong in reading any of them. Do know that a lot of them are very difficult to read because of the subject matter, but it's not because they're not well-written books. And I will be back again soon with another video. You will probably see some more BookTube Prize content from me in 2024. If you're new here, please consider sticking around. I make videos about books, I make videos about the travels that I take, and I make books about my artistic practice. And I would love to have you stick around and check out some of my other videos. Thank you so much for watching. I'll be back again soon with another video.